In today's video, we're going to be exploring in great detail the healing journey. And why is this important? Well, if you're dealing with a complex chronic health condition, then you know that this is a longer process and that you've most likely been on a journey of sorts. And this is a term that a lot of practitioners use, a lot of patients use this term, the healing journey. And personally, I've always shied away from that. I never wanted to use this kind of language. And when I started to examine why I felt that way, it was because so many times the healing journey is just another way of saying, I don't know, without having to admit that we don't know. Meaning, a patient takes a new type of treatment, it doesn't work, the practitioner doesn't have a plan, and they say, well, I guess it must be part of your healing journey. And they kind of just cop out. It's a vagary, and we're copping out to complexity. We're ultimately surrendering to complexity when we use this term in this way. So I've met many, many patients over the years, and they all feel like they're on some kind of healing journey. So I finally decided to explore this term and to kind of lean into it. And instead of being repelled by the way people use it as a cop-out, instead I actually dove in and I mapped out the entire healing journey. And I think you're going to love this, because if you're trying to heal, it's very important to know where you are on this journey, because there are going to be different points along the journey where your mindset, your beliefs, the strategies you're trying, the approaches you're taking, they're going to make sense or they're not, depending on where you are in the journey. There are different parts of this journey that will only open up when you start to realize different things. And I know I'm making this like really built up, but I'm going to explain this all in very fine detail, because I went ahead and mapped the entire healing journey out from start to finish, right? All the way from A to Z. And I know with granular detail all the little places and points on that journey. And I want to share this with you so that you can figure out where you are, because once you know where you are on the map, then you know how you got there and you know what needs to change to get you to the next step. This is supremely important. So, hi, Jeremy here, Modern Vitality. You might be familiar with some of my work. This video is going to be kind of an in-depth breakdown, and I'm going to be sharing parts of my computer, and I'm going to be taking clips of other things I've said in other videos, because we're creating an overarching thesis here about the healing journey. So this one's going to be pretty special. I suggest you dive in, take some notes if you want. Of course, I have the Solutions and Support group, Modern Vitality Solutions and Support. It's a free group to join. You might be interested in joining that group. I'll be pulling a lot of case studies out of that group. So all the things I share here, all the pictures, the screenshots, it's all real life examples. And of course, I've blurred out the names and that for privacy. Of course, I respect that. But I do want to share with you real people's stories so that you can see some vignettes here. And through sharing this, I hope to set you free on your path. So let's get started. What does a healing journey look like? Well, this is one of our annual members who was so kind to share her journey, and she actually documented her eyes, and you can see the health in the eyes. And you can see here's somebody who was dealing with a lot of inflammatory issues, a lot of complex chronic multisystematic problems going on. And what happened over the course of 2 years is we have a before picture at the start of the journey, and we have an after picture 2 years later. And what we see here is an incredible transformation. You can see the outward signs of health coming back and this vitality. How do we go from the eyes on the left to the eyes on the right? Well, I'm going to take you on a little trip. I think the best way to share this with you is to put a circle here, and we're going to be looking at these specific points on the circle where we have gates to pass. And I know this is going to sound very poetic and metaphorical. These are real things that happen, and you can start to see the subconscious human transformation happening as you go through the healing journey. And if you understand these different gates and what it takes to become a different version of yourself as you pass through each one, then you'll know where you are in your process. And I'm going to explore all these 3 gates in detail in this video. So we'll start at the top with vitality. Now, this is the state before any illness has set in, right? A lot of people I meet, they've been dealing with complex chronic health conditions like Lyme, fibro, chronic fatigue syndrome. Now we have long haulers. There's a lot of these: reactivated Epstein-Barr, mold illness, candida, adrenal fatigue. There's a ton of these. Anything autoimmune, all these gnarly head scratcher mystery illnesses. A lot of people I meet, they've been dealing with this stuff for a long time, a long, long time. Post-viral fatigue, it's a real thing. Right? And sometimes in some of these cases, like the fibro cases, the Lyme cases, I've seen people who've been decades of never having felt anything close to vitality. I've also met people who have been ill ever since they were a little kid. So not everybody starts from this point. And this whole journey, I'm going to show it in a very clean arc, and I'm going to be comprehensive, but just know that of course, there's going to be small variations, and you're going to have your own version of this path. What I'm laying out is the overarching architecture of what everybody's going through in one degree or another. And of course, you need to customize this model to fit your unique history. But I'm going to start with vitality because some people they just have what they would consider a normal active life, right? And then all of a sudden something happens and they wind up not feeling the same. And what does that look like when we start to not feel the same? We start to not feel vitality? Well, it looks like symptoms, right? And what are some of the common symptoms? Fatigue, exhaustion, brain fog, chronic pains, digestive issues, swelling, insomnia, libido changes, anxiety, depression. There's a ton of these. The list really goes on and on and on. I'm giving you some of the common ones. Migraines are another one, joint pains, arthritis. There's so much of this. So we're going to start with current situation right now. Okay, right now, currently, when people are having complex inflammatory conditions, usually they've got a pile of symptoms, right? And the symptoms could be fatigue. Sorry about my writing. I'm just going to blast this out here, but fatigue, right? All the weird pains, wandering pains, they feel inflamed, like they're getting the flu, like for weeks or months. There's usually a swelling, carrying water in different ways, retaining fluids, focus trouble, like brain fog, sleep trouble, digestive. I mean, the list really keeps going. Everybody starts looking at their thyroid, hormones, things like that. The sex drive, the libido is just toast. There's a lot of stuff that happens here. It can be overwhelming. Absolutely. People come in, they say, I feel like a hot mess. So when we zoom out, we can see a whole spread of symptoms. And a lot of people are experiencing these. This snapshot is just from this month of the people I've talked to in my solutions and support group and what they've reported. So just know if you're feeling a lot of these things, you're not alone. There's a lot of people going through this right now. So where are these symptoms coming from? Most likely they're coming from triggers in one shape or another. Now, what are triggers? Triggers could be pathogens, mycotoxins, chemicals, weather changes, travel, foods, GMOs, stressors, EMFs, physical injury like car accidents, falling off a horse, depletion, meaning you haven't been sleeping enough, you've been doing too much, whether it's too much work, too much play, staying up late, hormonal changes. There's a ton of different triggers, an absolute ton of them. And this is where it starts to get a little complex. Sometimes we can figure out what the major triggers are with a question like this. Ever since blank, I've never felt the same. Ever since I fell off the horse, I've never felt the same. Ever since I had that virus, I've never felt the same. Ever since I was pregnant and then gave birth, I've never felt the same. Ever since I moved to that new city or moved to that new house or changed jobs or got a divorce or whatever it is, if you can fill in that blank, then that's going to be pretty informative in terms of understanding what some of the major triggers are for you in terms of how your system is responding and where some of these symptoms are coming from. Now, not everybody has such a cut and dry onset. Some people can't really answer this. And in those cases, the symptoms have come on more gradually. And usually, in both instances, we have a pile of triggers all piling up, and it's usually the straw that breaks the camel's back. And either it's a very loud event like this where you can fill in the blank, or it's something that's just been kind of adding up quietly over time. But either way, it's a nod to the complexity that's under the surface. Eventually, the symptoms start getting so intrusive that we give up some of the things we used to love doing. And that's when we enter the shrinking world. Now, what is the shrinking world? Well, every time we have to say no to something we used to say yes to. Every time we give up something we love doing because of our health, because we're not confident that we're going to have the energy to follow through on our plans, or we can't leave our house because we need to be nearby in case we get a crash, or we can't go to restaurants because food will make us sick, or we can't be around other people because we get so overstimulated because we haven't learned how to control our empathic gifts because we're still too inflamed. It goes on and on and on. That is the shrinking world. So when we have all the symptoms piling up, what we get is, we call it the shrinking world, because this is really how this stuff starts to impact your life. And one of the best ways, I just draw a little circle with all these arrows going in, because what we usually do, and this is a human tendency, is that we start to lose trust in our bodies, and we start to lose trust in our symptoms, right? If they're going to come or not, we don't know. And then we have a hard time saying yes to things. So what tends to happen, most people, they'll just start to shrink their world down, which means if somebody invites you out for dinner, you say, I don't know, that's next week. I don't know how I'm going to be feeling. I can't. You're thinking about a trip. Well, I'm probably going to get tired. I might feel bad about slowing everybody down. I might be in a lot of pain. Traveling might be miserable. What if I catch a cold when I'm there? It's going to just totally flare me up. No, I better not. All these things. If you're working in a professional capacity and you're having wicked fatigue, you've got to say no to another client. Can't take on another client ethically, right? I can't do this. I can't handle this workload because I don't know. The life radius shrinks. A lot of people I work with, they don't want to be too far from home because in case they crash, they need to know they can get to their bed. It's normal for this to happen, right? Not necessarily healthy, not optimal, but what I will tell you is you're in very good company if this is you. If your world is shrinking, that's what happens, okay? This is a normal response. But this is where you want to start to get your life back. So when you look in the future, we're going, okay, we want this world to start expanding, which means saying yes to stuff, right? All the things that you love doing, you want to be able to get out there and live life, connect with other people without having to worry about the uncertainty. So this can be really tough to think about. This can be a really hard-hitting topic. It's definitely not a fun thought experiment. We even have interactive videos in our solutions and support group where we go through the shrinking world in depth, and people cry going through that exercise, and rightfully so. There's a lot of grief around this because ultimately at this point, you've given up a lot of things that you used to love doing. The shrinking world is defined by silent internal suffering. So at this point, we're usually starting to feel the pain. We're not doing some of the things we used to enjoy doing, but we haven't necessarily vocalized this or sought help yet. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. The shrinking world has its own beliefs that come with it. When people start on this point in the journey, they will be saying things to themselves like, oh, this is just old age, or oh, it's just my genetics. This is just who I am. And ultimately, this kind of gets summed up with statements like, I can't, I shouldn't. I can't climb stairs anymore. I shouldn't say yes to that trip, right? I can't plan that party. I can't commit. I shouldn't, right? This is a very shrinking world kind of concept. But a lot of times at this point, we don't necessarily know that there's something actually wrong because a lot of people, this is where I really go off on this, is about people with old age and some of these other cop-outs. And we can come back to this later, but oh, I'm just getting old. That's why. Not necessarily. Oh, it's my genetics. Not necessarily. Genetics is not the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of the conversation. This is just who I am. Are you sure? Because it's not who you were. If you're giving up things, then you're changing. And we need to be aware of that. We can't be shy about this. We're not going to succumb to the complexity. This whole process, what I'm sharing with you to go through this healing journey is so we can start to dive in, right? We want to look at these problems and we want to start to understand them, which we are going to be doing. We're continuing on. And the next point is the abyss. What's really important with the abyss is where we start to confront the reality that what we're feeling is not actually normal. There are people I've worked with, very interesting cases where there was a woman who was in her 60s and she was bedridden, in pain all the time. She had a really bad case of fibromyalgia. She was constantly inflamed. And she was thinking in her head, this is miserable. I've given up so much, but this must just be what old age is. And then she started talking to her sister, who was around her same age. And her sister said, oh, I'm not bedridden like that. No, I wake up and I don't really have, I've got some aches and pains, but I don't have that crippling joint pain, and I've got enough energy to do things and all that. And she thought, well, if my sister feels good and I don't feel good, maybe this isn't normal. Maybe I do have a problem. And for her, that was the spark, right? That took her from thinking that the pain she was feeling was normal or deserved or old age or whatever. And she started to realize that there actually was an abyss in front of her, that she needed to be able to solve this, that she actually has a problem. When we have this current situation, a lot of times this future can seem like infinitely far away. And I'm going to draw this as like a little bracket here, and I'm going to write abyss. And the reason why I call this the abyss is because when you're sitting in this position going, okay, I feel like a hot mess. Yeah. And I've tried a few things. They haven't really worked. And I'm starting to get frustrated, overwhelmed, pissed off, right? A little bit depressed, a little bit terrified, if I'm being honest, right? All that stuff kind of kicks in. And just to think, how am I going to get from where I am right now to having any kind of life back, right? It can be like, it just seems infinite. It's like, how am I going to do this? The abyss is defined by internally realizing there's a problem, where you decide, hey, this isn't normal. This isn't just old age. This isn't just my genetics. There is actually something going on here. Even if you don't know how to fix it yet, this is a very important point on the healing journey. We're going from internally feeling things, thinking they're normal, and kind of almost gaslighting ourselves, like, no, this is just what I get, to starting to wake up and going, wow, there is a problem here. And that's the first step. So the prevailing beliefs at the abyss, how I feel is not normal, this is a problem, and often and very commonly, holy smokes, I'm lost. Look at this. This is a gaping, huge abyss. I don't know how to navigate this. And don't worry, I'll show you how we navigate it a little bit later on. Now that we've confronted the reality of the shrinking world and the abyss, we're ready to pass the first gate. When the first gate opens up, we enter the first phase of the healing journey, which is actually where we start to seek out treatment and try to get help. It's very important. Everything we've done up until this point has been preliminary. Just noticing there's an actual problem and then being able to admit that. That's so important. Some people don't make it past that stage. Really. So we have to move through all these points. I know I'm going to be very comprehensive here, and you may think, oh, of course, everybody knows there's a problem. Not so. I've spoken to a lot of people who struggled with the abyss for years of thinking it was normal. Like I mentioned, the lady with the sister, she really thought it was normal. She hadn't crossed that point. And then once she did, her belief system started to change and new possibilities opened up for her. So at the first gate, all of our gates, we've got 3 gates. And at the first gate, there's a password, right? Password, please. What are the magic words that are going to open up this gate? Well, the magic words on the healing journey are going to come down to your beliefs. And when you have this kind of software running in your brain, these gates will naturally open. It's not like there's going to be a genie who shows up at your house and just says, hey, it seems like you've noticed that you have an abyss to solve, right? You've acknowledged there's a problem. Now, what's the password? It's not that. I'm being a little metaphorical here. But because our reality is so filtered by our brain, by our mind, by our belief system, if we have stifled beliefs or we hang on to outdated beliefs, we are going to be blind to possibilities that are in front of us or have been all along. So the password to get through the first gate comes in the form of beliefs. And it's a transformation because we have old beliefs of this is just old age, it's my genetics, this is just who I am, I can't, I shouldn't, right? Shrinking world stuff. All of a sudden we're turning into the abyss. We're starting to realize there's a problem. How I feel is not normal, actually. This is a problem. I think I'm lost here. And what do these preliminary beliefs evolve to? I need help. I deserve help. I am worth it. Okay, some variation of this is the password you need to have to open the first gate. Because how are we going to go find help if we haven't already admitted we need it? And how are we going to stick to anything if we don't think we deserve it? We're not worth it, right? So these are the kind of beliefs that motivate you to put yourself through this first gate and enter this true first phase of your healing journey. Another way to sum all this up, I have a mountain to climb. Right? I have an abyss to cross. I have a mountain to climb. I really like the mountain metaphor, and we're going to dive into that in this presentation. So maybe we'll have that one in our heads as well. So I symbolize the first phase with a square. The square here symbolizes simple solutions. We're in the land of simplicity. That's phase 1, simplicity. So we start simple. We look externally, outside of ourselves. We talk to our friends and family. We talk to our doctor or whoever is our first source of healthcare and advice. Oftentimes what happens too is we start to oversimplify our problem, meaning we have a real question, which is how do I get my life back? I've got a shrinking world, something's wrong. How do I fix that? And we start substituting smaller versions of that question, meaning what's my diagnosis, right? What is my diagnosis? Instead of how do I get my life back, we think how do I get a diagnosis? Which is good. It's good to think this way, but that's not the be all end all. There are certain beliefs that tend to reign here in this first phase, like I need a diagnosis, because oftentimes we assume we need to get a diagnosis so that we can get a treatment so that we can get better, right? It's a very linear progression, and here's how this usually goes. We've passed the first gate. We believe we need help. We go to conventional medicine or whatever our first call is, and that leads to a diagnosis, which leads to a silver bullet treatment, which leads to success. And if that's the case, then what you just proved to yourself is you had a very simple case. Your complex chronic health condition was not complex at all. It was actually very, very simple. Now, this is the absolute minority of people that have this experience. And if this was you, you probably wouldn't be watching this, to be honest with you, because most of the people who wind up in my world have more complex cases, right? It's never this clean and cut and dry. So what else could happen? We could go to conventional medicine and we could get a diagnosis, a silver bullet treatment, and unfortunately, it didn't work, right? Because that simple diagnosis and that simple treatment or symptom suppression treatment, right? It's a little branch treatment, the Band-Aids, they're not going to work long-term for most people. And now you become a puzzle, right? Your doctor is scratching their head about it. And I'm a little tongue-in-cheek about doctors, but I have a lot of friends that are MDs, and they're wonderful people, very smart, big hearts. They're trying to do really good work. The thing about that is they're kind of stuck in a system that won't let them see complexity. And we'll get into that later on. But in general, a lot of the people I meet, they've been through that system and they've kind of come out the other side feeling like, boy, I'm a puzzle, right? My doctor doesn't know what to do with me. Now, another way this can go is you go to the conventional medicine and you don't get a diagnosis. Your labs look normal, or we can't find what's wrong with you, or whatever you have doesn't have a name, right? That's another possibility. And in that case, we're right back to the end here, no luck, right? No diagnosis, no treatment, no luck. Sorry, wish we could help you. And once this happens, the next step on the healing journey can be very unpleasant, but is also quite necessary. And that's invalidation, the invalidation point. And when we're here at the invalidation point, you either couldn't get a diagnosis or you did, and it didn't lead to any real sustainable solution. So what can then start to happen is your doctors, your family, your friends, they might not support you. You might start to doubt yourself. They might think it's all in your head. You're making it up, right? You're faking it. You're doing something so you can get meds, right? You don't look sick. You're lazy. Like all these things, these kind of weird thoughts that start to creep in, right? Am I going crazy? Is it all in my head? It can make you doubt yourself. But what you might not know just yet is that when you're at this point in the healing journey, the external invalidation of people doubting you, or at the very least, like not helping you or not understanding, it's due to the system you're in having the wrong lens for your problem. It's due to being in an oversimplified system. They just can't see it. And just because they're blind to your problem doesn't make you crazy. It means you need a better paradigm. You need a better perspective. Sometimes getting a diagnosis is good because you get validated. You go, hey, I've got a real thing going on. At least there's that. But then where do you go from there, right? What kind of treatment does that diagnosis lead to? The diagnosis is supposed to be a bridge to take you somewhere, right? So a lot of times we kind of get stuck in limbo there. And that's why, when you're stuck in limbo, that's why these silver bullets start to become attractive, okay? And I understand, but here's the deal. When you try something and it doesn't work, okay, great, I'll try something else. Try that, doesn't work. Okay, great, I'll try something else. There's only so many times most people can handle that before their morale starts to dip down and they go, you know what? Everything I try, nothing works. Screw it. I'm hopeless. Silver bullets are just one-shot magic deals. They only work for very simple cases. If that was you and a silver bullet changed your life, you're very, very lucky. Most people with complex chronic health conditions, it's going to take a lot more than that. The invalidation phase is dark and it's difficult. Passing the first gate is enough to start asking for help, but it's nowhere near enough to solve a complex problem. So what's happening here is that you're getting kind of trapped in a system, an early system in this first gate, first phase, that's by nature simple. Because we haven't yet discovered, this is part of the discovery process, we haven't yet discovered that your case is complex. And they're oversimplifying it. And I'm going to show you the mechanism and how that looks. But basically, one of the things that I really hope to impart here is that the lesson of the first gate is to believe in yourself and how you feel, even if the establishment and everyone else external to you is invalidating you. This is the way we get past the invalidation stage, is to start to believe in ourselves anyway. This is a lesson that can't be fast-tracked. It's painful, but the deep sense of trusting in yourself that you earn in this phase will serve you well in the future. Because what's happening is you're continuing to stack up new beliefs that will lead to a new reality. And here's the response when silver bullets fail. This is from one of our members in our solutions and support group. It was drilled into my head that what I've been diagnosed with is a drug seeker's disease and isn't even real. I've heard this for so long that I can't even say fibromyalgia with a straight face and strong ownership of a truly painful and debilitating part of my life. It's like it's embarrassing to say it. However, I've been living with it since I was 27 and I'm now 52. I don't know about you, but to me that seems like an awful long time to fake something. Right? This is where we're starting to get an internal dialogue where the beliefs are evolving. Hey, they told me that I'm drug seeking and my disease isn't real, right? Fibromyalgia in this case. But I feel it's truly painful, so we have some conflict going on. This is what happens in the invalidation phase. If you feel like this, you're not alone. It's universal. Here's another one. I have so many examples of doctors, friends, and family questioning if what I'm going through is real. A Stanford MD said to me, "Are you sure it's Lyme disease and not just old age?" Considering that I have also been sick since my late 20s, no, I don't think it's old age, right? I love this logic here. Old age doesn't set in your late 20s. So good for this person who's standing up for themselves despite the invalidation, right? It's really, really important that you develop this, because this is another place where people tend to fall off. They'll just quit. And that's the choice, right? Oh, do I lay down and die? Do I listen to everybody that say that there's no hope, no help, I'm making it up? Oh, it's old age. Do I listen to them and go backwards on the healing journey, or do I push through? Do I persist? The invalidation stage is not an easy stage. So remember this. Here's what usually happens. Conventional medicine, either a diagnosis or not. If you get very, very lucky, you'll have success with your very simple case. Otherwise, no luck. You're a puzzle. And here's basically what's happening with this. You've got a professional, and I put the square there because they're using a simple lens to look at your problem. And your problem is that mountain up there on the right. right? That's your mountain to climb. You get to the top of the mountain, you're healed. You're back to living your life. Your shrinking world has re-expanded, right? We need to get from the base to the top. That's probably the most important thing you got going on in your life. And here we have somebody with a very simple mindset, right? Because they're using a simple paradigm to try to solve simple problems. And they're looking at your mountain with a telescope. Yep, it's definitely triangle shaped and pointing at the top. Okay, you're all set here. Next. Right? Well, that doesn't help, does it? Right? But that's what happens when we use the wrong kind of lens to look at a problem. So invalidation is defined by the external world challenging your inner truth, and then you feeling the struggle and the conflict around that and trying to figure out what to do. Some of the beliefs in the invalidation part of the healing journey, they say there's nothing actually wrong. It's all in my head. I don't look sick, right? These are tempting beliefs that are coming at you from the external world who has the wrong paradigm anyway. Remember this with the telescope, right? This person doesn't understand how to look at your problem. That's why they're coming up with this. So you have to graduate this phase, you have to be willing to take these ideas, take them in your mind, and then take them right back out and listen to yourself. And that's when we reach the second gate and things start to become a little more interesting. We'll continue with this in the next part of this series.